Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. So last summer, I went away. My wife and I went away it was a little longer than a week, right around July 4th. So middle of the summer, hottest part of the summer, and middle of my gardening efforts. And when we came home, I thought everything would just be fine, right? I mean, I'd given my garden plenty of water leading up to it. I'd been weeding, I'd been, doing everything you need to do up to this point. And then I took a break, right? It was like 9 or 10 days where we were away and didn't water and didn't do anything. And when we came home, not everything was lost, but we definitely did damage to a couple of the plants that we had because we didn't continue the process. And the unique thing is that in this life, a lot of people believe that if you're not growing, you're going backwards. That there isn't this, you can't take like a 10-day break on life, especially when it comes to our spiritual life. We can't just walk away from it and expect nothing to change or no weeds to show up or potentially some plants to get ruined. In John 15, 5 through 8, Jesus is continuing to talk about this gardening farmer metaphor with God in our lives. And Jesus says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. When you're joined with me, I with you, the relation is intimate and it's organic. And then the harvest is sure to be abundant. However, separated from me, you can't produce anything. See, Jesus is saying that I am essentially, as long as you stay connected to me, you're in this process of growing. It's the fertilizer, the water, the pruning, the weeding. That's being connected to Jesus and spending time with Jesus is that consistent process of growing so that we don't just stand still and go backwards. He goes on to say, anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered and thrown into a fire. But if you make yourselves at home with me and my words are at home in you, then you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is. When you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples. Jesus says the way to continue to grow, to not experience this, what we think is static and stagnant, which really is, like it's only going the wrong way from there. Instead, he says, stay connected to me, and you will continue to grow. And what we want to talk about today is how do we do that in our faith? And we started this series on gardening and how we interact with other people, focusing on how we share Jesus with outsiders, with other people. But today we're going to talk about our own personal life, how we can continue to spend time nurturing our faith so that we have healthy garden and healthy crop to then go out into this world. So today I want to talk to you about personal spiritual practices. Most of the time when we think about personal spiritual practices, we think about things like reading the Bible, praying, maybe journaling, writing as a part of that action and process, and also serving. So using our time and talents to give back to others. So those are things that you could consider in your life. If you were to rate yourself, if we had like a circle, and you were to rate yourself on how well you're doing, how often you're having regular conversations with God praying, how often are you reading the Bible, and in what ways are you doing so, and are you spending time reflecting on that? Do you like to write or journal and kind of catalog your thoughts and prayers? And lastly, are you giving of your time? How often are you serving? And if you guys questions around those 4 things, rate yourself from like 1 to 5 or so, and any places where in that circle you're not as good, maybe you could set some goals around that. Because remember, if we don't, then we start to go backwards. We're not as connected to Jesus. But I would also encourage us to think through, not all of us are wired in that way, that it's, for me, the only way I connect with God, or the best way I connect with God, is through reading and prayer and serving and journaling. There's a lot of us who have other things in our lives that we should consider personal spiritual practices. Some of us love to sing And having the radio on at full blast and just singing our hearts out is connecting with God. Some of us just like to be quiet, peaceful, still, and listen. Other people are good at art, and when we use our hands and when we draw or when we sculpt something, we are engaging with God. And I know other people who love nature, who just going for a walk in nature or maybe gardening is spending time with God. And that's what I want you to consider this week for all of us as we live out our faith this week. Consider what are our top 3 to 4 personal spiritual practices that when we engage in those, when we fertilize, water, prune, and weed, what are those things in our lives so that we can stay connected to God and that we can continue to grow instead of go backwards or be disconnected from the lifeline, the vine that Jesus says he is.